He has frozen in Arctic rivers, slept inside the carcass of a dead animal, and spent months studying the mind of a con man just to get a role right. Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the few actors on the planet whose name alone can sell out a theater. Yet for over 2 decades, he was Hollywood's most famous Oscar bridesmaid. How did a shy kid from one of Los Angeles' roughest neighborhoods become one of the most respected actors of his generation? And what finally happened tonight? He walked away with a golden statue everyone said he deserved years earlier. Let's find out. Leonardo Wilhelm DiCaprio was born on November 11, 1974, in Los Angeles. His father, George, was a comic book distributor with a passion for underground art, while his mother, Ermeline, worked as a legal secretary. Their marriage ended before Leonardo's first birthday, but both parents stayed closely involved in raising him, splitting custody and shaping him in very different ways. Money was tight. For years, Leonardo and his mother lived in a rundown section of East Hollywood where drug activity and violence were part of daily life. DiCaprio later spoke openly about how unsettling that environment was for a child, admitting that witnessing addiction up close at such a young age left a lasting impression on him. One that, ironically, made him wary of the excesses that so often trap young actors once they find fame. Despite the hardship, his childhood wasn't without color. His father's social circle included cartoonists, painters, and countercultural figures, exposing young Leonardo to a bohemian, creative world most kids never see. He was a natural performer from the start, mimicking people, inventing characters, and craving attention in front of any audience willing to watch. By the time he was 2, his father had already put him on a small stage, and getting him to leave it afterward proved nearly impossible. His path toward acting accelerated because of his older stepbrother, Adam, who had already begun booking television commercials. Watching Adam get paid reform lit a fire in young Leonardo, and by age 5, he was auditioning for anything he could find. His very first appearance came on the children's program Romper Room. Though the experience ended in chaos, he got so excited that he ran wild around the set instead of following directions. It wasn't exactly a triumphant debut. The years that followed brought a long string of rejections. Casting agents dismissed him for having an unusual name and an awkward haircut, with some suggesting he adopt something more conventional, like Lenny. DiCaprio has since described those early years as formative in a painful way. He felt like a permanent outsider looking in at an industry that refused to let him join. Still, small jobs trickled in. He appeared in commercials for cereal, cheese, and car brands, and spent his free time breakdancing, even placing as a runner-up in a local competition while visiting family in Germany. Eventually, his persistence paid off, and he began landing recurring roles on television series, including a stint on the soap opera Santa Barbara and a part on the family sitcom Growing Pains, where he played a scrappy street kid who ended up outshining some of the show's original stars. DiCaprio's first real dramatic showcase came in 1993, when director Michael Cotton Jones cast him opposite Robert De Niro in This Boy's Life. The audition process was almost a disaster. DiCaprio's nervous energy made the room burst into laughter, and he left convinced he had blown his one shot at a serious career. He got the part anyway, and sharing a set with an icon like De Niro pushed him to raise his game immediately. Watching De Niro's discipline and total immersion in character, DiCaprio would later say, taught him more about acting than any classroom ever could. That same year, director Lasse Hallström needed someone to play Arnie, a developmentally disabled teenager, in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. The role demanded total physical and emotional transformation, and DiCaprio threw himself into research, visiting families and care facilities to understand his character honestly rather than as a caricature. The performance earned him his first Academy Award nomination at just 19 years old, and put the industry on notice that this wasn't just another pretty face. There was real crap behind it. The following years brought a mix of gritty, sometimes uncomfortable material from The Basketball Diaries, where he played a teenage addict spiraling into crime, to Total Eclipse, a period drama about the volatile relationship between 2 French poets. Neither film was a commercial hit, but both cemented his willingness to take on difficult, unglamorous characters rather than coast on his looks. Then, in 1996, everything changed. Director Baz Luhrmann cast him as a lead in a bold, modernized adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, set in a fictional American city, but keeping Shakespeare's original dialogue. The film was a sensation, particularly among teenage audiences, and it turned DiCaprio into a global phenomenon almost overnight. Suddenly, his face was everywhere, and Leomania became a real cultural term. If Romeo and Juliet made him famous, Titanic made him a legend. James Cameron's massive 1997 epic wasn't originally destined to star DiCaprio. The director considered a long list of actors before ultimately deciding that DiCaprio had the charisma to carry a nearly 3.5-hour love story opposite Kate Winslet. That chemistry between the two leads turned out to be the heart of the entire production. The shoot itself was grueling. Cast and crew spent months filming in freezing water tanks, with days stretching to 14 hours or more. DiCaprio has recalled the sheer exhaustion of those months, admitting that by the end, he was thoroughly done with the giant sets and endless retakes. Winslet, too, faced an intense introduction to their partnership, having performed an emotionally vulnerable scene with someone she barely knew during the earliest days of filming. When Titanic finally hit theaters, it shattered box office records and became a cultural touchstone, eventually taking home 11 Academy Awards. Curiously, Best Actor wasn't one of them. DiCaprio wasn't even nominated, a snub that still puzzles film historians today. He skipped the ceremony entirely, a decision that reportedly frustrated Cameron, who felt his star wasn't showing enough appreciation for the opportunity the film had given him. The fame that followed was overwhelming. DiCaprio became arguably the most photographed young actor on the planet, and for a while, he leaned into a lighter, more carefree period of his career and personal life. But two back-to-back disappointments, a poorly received swashbuckler and a minor part in a Woody Allen film, convinced it was time to step back, reassess, and figure out what kind of career he actually wanted. DiCaprio's return to serious filmmaking came through one of the most important partnerships of his career, his collaboration with director Martin Scorsese. Their first project together, Gangs of New York, had been a passion project for Scorsese for decades, and production was massive in scale, recreating an entire 19th century New York neighborhood on a studio backlit. DiCaprio committed fully, bulking up and training in combat choreography to embody a vengeful young gang leader. That same period brought Catch Me If You Can, directed by Steven Spielberg, in which DiCaprio played a real-life teenage con artist who impersonated pilots, doctors, and lawyers while evading the FBI. Spielberg later praised DiCaprio's work ethic and instinctive understanding of character, noting that the actor's off-screen reputation as a tabloid fixture had little to do with the focused professional he encountered on set. DiCaprio and Scorsese reunited soon after for The Aviator, a sprawling biopic about eccentric billionaire Howard Hughes. DiCaprio spent well over a year researching the role, eventually recognizing personal parallels with Hughes' struggles with obsessive-compulsive tendencies, something DiCaprio has said he has dealt with since childhood. The performance earned widespread critical acclaim and another Oscar nomination, but once again, the statue eluded him. Their next film together, The Departed, proved to be one of the most acclaimed thrillers of the decade. Working alongside Jack Nicholson pushed DiCaprio into unfamiliar territory. Nicholson's unpredictable, sometimes theatrical behavior on set kept the entire cast on edge in a way that DiCaprio later described as one of the most memorable experiences of his acting life. The film swept award season, ultimately winning Best Picture, though the recognition for DiCaprio himself remained just out of reach. Further collaborations followed, including the psychological thriller Shutter Island, a dense, unsettling film that split critics but has since developed a passionate following, and later, The Wolf of Wall Street, an audacious, darkly comic portrait of financial fraud that many consider one of DiCaprio's most electric performances. Playing a character with virtually no moral compass, DiCaprio said, was strangely freeing as an actor. There was nothing to justify or soften. By the mid-2010s, DiCaprio had built one of the most respected filmographies of his generation, working with directors like Christopher Nolan on the mind-bending heist thriller Inception, and Quentin Tarantino on both Django Unchained and later, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. In Django Unchained, DiCaprio took on a role of cruel plantation owner, a character he described as one of the most repugnant he had ever read, and famously stayed in character even after accidentally cutting his hand on broken glass during a take, letting the real injury fuel the scene's intensity. Then came The Revenant, in 2015, a brutal survival story shot almost entirely with natural light in punishing, freezing locations. Director Alejandro G. Inarritu refused to rely on digital shortcuts, forcing the cast to endure genuine sub-zero conditions for months across Canada and Argentina. DiCaprio has called it the most physically demanding shoot of his career, describing the numbing cold, the heavy wet furs he wore, and the constant risk of hypothermia during river scenes. The performance, largely wordless, built on physical endurance and raw desperation. Finally earned DiCaprio the Academy Award for Best Actor in 2016. The moment was less a surprise than a long overdue correction, and DiCaprio used his acceptance speech to draw attention to climate change, a cause he had already spent nearly 2 decades championing. Long before winning his Oscar, DiCaprio had built a second identity as one of Hollywood's most active environmental advocates. He established his own foundation dedicated to conservation efforts in 1998, and has since funded numerous projects protecting endangered species and fragile ecosystems. He produced and appeared in environmental documentaries, invested in sustainable seafood initiatives, and was appointed a United Nations Messenger of Peace focused on climate issues. His personal habits reflect that same commitment. For years, he favored a modest hybrid car over flashy alternatives and avoided private jets in favor of commercial travel, citing the environmental costs of unnecessary luxury. It's a side of his public persona that stands in sharp contrast to the tabloid image that followed him through much of his 20s and 30s. That tabloid image was fueled by a long list of high-profile relationships with models and actresses over the years, from his early romance with Gisele Bündchen to a lengthy relationship with Israeli model Bara Filey. Despite the constant media attention, DiCaprio has generally kept his personal life guarded, preferring not to discuss relationships publicly. His enduring friendship with Kate Winslet, however, has remained one of the most talked-about bonds in Hollywood. The two have supported each other through decades of career highs and personal milestones, including DiCaprio walking her down the aisle at her wedding. Even after finally securing his long-awaited Oscar, DiCaprio has shown no interest in slowing down or coasting on past success. He continued picking roles selectively, appearing in the satirical climate disaster film Don't Look Up alongside an enormous ensemble cast, and reuniting once again with Scorsese for a dramatic retelling of a dark chapter in American history involving the Osage Nation. What sets DiCaprio apart from many of his peers isn't just talent. It's an unusual willingness to sacrifice comfort, money, and even physical safety for the sake of a performance. Whether it's losing significant weight for a role, taking a reduced salary so a passion project could get made, or enduring genuinely dangerous filming conditions, he has built a reputation as an actor who treats every role as if it were his last shot at proving himself. The same hunger that drove him through years of rejection as a kid trying to break into an industry that once didn't want him. From a struggling kid auditioning for commercials to one of the most respected actors alive, Leonardo DiCaprio's story is really about persistence, about refusing to settle for easy fame, and instead spending decades chasing roles that scared him. That relentless drive, more than any single award, is probably what will define his legacy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this look into Leonardo DiCaprio's journey, let us know in the comments which of his films left the biggest impression on you.